Brutal Formula One news. Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris are swapping teams for the 2025 to 2026 season. Stay until the end to find out why this shocking move has shaken the entire F1 world. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. The Paddock hasn't seen a tremor like this in over a decade. This is not just a driver move. This is a cultural earthquake reverberating through every garage, every strategy room, every simulator and executive boardroom in Formula One. The world of motorsport woke up to an alternate reality. Lando Norris, draped in the silver flame of Mercedes, and Lewis Hamilton, the living legend, walking back through the doors of Woking as if fate had scripted it from the start. This isn't a marketing stunt. This isn't a nostalgia play. This is the kind of story that reshapes dynasties. The kind of move that sends engineers into overdrive, CEOs into emergency meetings, and fans into frenzied speculation loops. But what's even more explosive than the headlines are the secrets behind this trade. The betrayals, the bruised egos, the midnight negotiations that unfolded on yachts, in private airport lounges, encrypted calls and Swiss bank boardrooms. You think you know the story? You don't. Not until you hear what really happened. Hamilton's departure from Ferrari wasn't a resignation. It was a revolution. A quiet, calculated rebellion disguised as professionalism. While the cameras zoomed in on Lewis smiling next to Vasseur in those press conferences, behind the scenes, he was orchestrating an exit that makes the Alonso McLaren scandals of the past look like child's play. Insiders who dared leak anything were either reassigned or erased from the structure. He was never comfortable. Not for a second. The walls of Maranello, painted in heritage and pride, became a prison of tradition. Hamilton, who had spent years at Mercedes fostering innovation, pushing for marginal gains from the wind tunnel to the pit stop choreography, was now stuck in a machine that viewed him less as a strategic mind and more as a figurehead. Ferrari didn't want the man with ideas. They wanted the myth. They wanted photo ops, they wanted exposure, but they didn't want his input in the factory's DNA. Hamilton didn't just feel underused. He felt betrayed. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. The drama escalated in ways the public was never meant to see. It wasn't just about vetoed upgrades or conservative race strategies. There were explosive meetings where Hamilton reportedly stormed out mid-session. One insider revealed that during a crucial mid-season development review, Hamilton had proposed a radical floor redesign based on simulator data he commissioned from a third-party consultant. Vasseur, furious that Lewis had gone off-book, allegedly called the idea amateur aero cosplay. From that point on, the relationship disintegrated faster than a soft compound on a green track. Engineers loyal to Hamilton began submitting their resignations. Ferrari's own telemetry department was divided, half still running 2022 protocols due to internal sabotage stemming from the power struggle between Hamilton's camp and the old guard. Meanwhile, Toto Wolff was playing a long game. A very long game. He had never truly moved on from Lewis. He knew that losing him to Ferrari was a blow not just to Mercedes, but to his own legacy. And while the world thought Toto was all in on Lando Norris, the truth is, Norris was always part of a broader chessboard. A piece. A brilliant, young, magnetic piece, but a piece nonetheless. Wolff's strategy was simple: bring Hamilton home not just to win races, but to anchor Mercedes during the seismic shifts of the 2026 regulation overhaul. Who better than the man who's navigated 3 regulation eras, 6 constructors' titles, and countless political battles? And if it meant sacrificing Norris, so be it. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. But Norris wasn't a passive pawn. Oh no. What fans don't see is just how much Norris wanted out. Publicly, he said all the right things. Privately, he hated it. The rigid, polished, machine-like culture of Mercedes never matched his raw, instinctive driving style. His best laps? They came in chaos, in wet-dry transitions, in wheel-to-wheel brawls. But Mercedes didn't want chaos. They wanted data. The engineers didn't always listen to his gut calls. The post-race debriefs turned into interrogation chambers. Norris, once a relaxed, cheeky breath of fresh air in F1, found himself silencing his own instincts just to survive the system. When McLaren reached out, covertly, through a mutual sponsor who had inside access to Norris's manager, it wasn't just an offer. It was an escape. McLaren's new leadership, armed with fresh capital, tech partnerships with quantum computing firms, and a revamped headquarters in Woking filled with artificial intelligence-enhanced design labs, didn't just want Lando, they needed him. Kenny Dorset, the new team principal with a background in psychological warfare from his days at Red Bull, viewed Norris as a generational disruptor. He believed that F1 was no longer just about lap times. It was about storytelling, about virality, about drivers who could command not just cars but attention. Norris, with his blend of charisma and raw speed, was Dorset's white whale. But convincing Mercedes to release Norris early required more than charm. It required leverage. And here's where it gets dark. Dorset is rumored to have received proprietary data on Norris's telemetry discrepancies that showed he was losing time due to chassis configurations designed around Russell's driving style. This data, illegally obtained, possibly from a disgruntled Mercedes employee, was reportedly presented during a secret arbitration session attended by legal teams from 3 countries. The conclusion? Mercedes had, even if unintentionally, compromised Norris's performance. That crack was all the leverage McLaren needed. Hamilton's deal with McLaren is not just a driving contract. It includes partial equity, full control over his engineering team, and an option to transition into a board advisory role post-retirement. He'll even have influence on the design language of McLaren's upcoming electric hypercar line, blending racing with brand power. Some say he's already working with their design studio, sketching out concepts between races. This is not a comeback. It's a coronation. And while all this unfolded, the FIA watched with clenched jaws. They knew the implications. 2 of the most media-powerful drivers in the world switching teams in a single coordinated move? This wasn't just a storyline, it was a television empire. Sponsors fought tooth and nail for placement. Netflix executives reportedly rushed to rewrite Season 8 of Drive to Survive, scrapping months of footage to focus on what they're calling the most dramatic season in F1 history. Amazon is said to be developing a competing documentary, and Apple TV is allegedly courting Hamilton for a post-season miniseries directed by none other than Jordan Peele. Because this is no longer just racing. It's a cultural spectacle. Teams have been thrown into chaos. Alpine has reportedly pulled out of 2026 supplier contracts in anticipation of poaching Mercedes junior talent. Aston Martin is in meltdown, with Fernando Alonso reportedly demanding a clause revision in light of these moves. Red Bull? Let's just say Christian Horner is livid. Verstappen has become unusually quiet, and Helmut Marko has flown to Japan 3 times in 2 weeks for reasons unknown. Every move is being watched. Every whisper has 1,000 ears. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. But the real storm is yet to come. Testing for 2025 will no longer be about pace. It will be about legacy. Hamilton returning to his roots, trying to end his career where it started, with triumph, with fire, with a 7th sense of justice. And Norris stepping into the seat that defined greatness, with the entire world watching to see whether he will fly or fall. Because when the lights go out in Bahrain next year, it won't just be a race. It will be a reckoning. The kind you feel in your bones. The kind that rewrites the future, 1 lap at a time. What happened after the Chinese Grand Prix wasn't just a disagreement, or a rough weekend, or even a flare-up between a frustrated driver and a struggling team. What happened in Shanghai may go down in the history books as the exact moment when Ferrari's boldest gamble in years began to collapse under its own weight. Because while the race results showed only minor damage, a 4th-place finish, nothing catastrophic, the real drama never touched the asphalt. The real explosion detonated in a soundproof room buried deep within the Paddock compound, where the air was supposed to be filled with data, not shouting. Where precision should have ruled, and where instead, chaos erupted. And it wasn't just chaos, it was personal, volcanic, raw, and so emotionally charged that one engineer reportedly left the room in tears and hasn't returned to the team's operations center since. According to no fewer than 5 sources, all of them either directly present or briefed by those who were, the post-race debrief spiraled out of control within minutes. Lewis Hamilton, visibly agitated, entered the room late and didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked past the screen, ignored the telemetry charts lining the walls, and sat at the far end of the long conference table, arms crossed, eyes locked. When the race strategy analyst began walking through the PowerPoint presentation, Hamilton interrupted before the first slide had even fully loaded. He didn't raise his voice at first, but the room could feel it. The tension was suffocating. "Let's not pretend this is a mystery," he said. according to one of the engineers present. "I told you exactly what the tires were doing. I told you we were losing grip. And you didn't listen." What followed wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush, calculated, unfiltered, and aimed directly at the heart of Ferrari's decision-making hierarchy. Frédéric Vasseur, team principal, tried to step in, offering his usual diplomatic line: that strategy is a team effort, that no single voice carries more weight than another in the heat of competition. But Hamilton wasn't in the mood for euphemisms. He cut him off. "That's your problem," he snapped. "Too many people talking. Nobody leading. You can't drive a car with 20 hands on the wheel." The room fell silent, but only for a beat. Vasseur fired back, reminding Hamilton that the simulations had indicated otherwise, that based on the data, the strategy they chose made sense at the time. But Hamilton, by now standing, visibly furious, pointed at the main screen where the stint data was displayed. "The data isn't in your computers. It's in my hands. You hired me to lead, then you mute me when it counts. What the hell am I doing here?" One engineer attempted to de-escalate, trying to explain how pit wall decisions factored in multiple data sources. Hamilton didn't even turn to look. "Don't give me the algorithm speech. I've raced in the wet, in the cold, on tires that should have exploded, and I've won. You think some predictive model knows better than I do after 330 races?" The confrontation intensified. Voices were raised. Vasseur, reportedly red-faced and visibly rattled, brought up Hamilton's early feedback in preseason testing, arguing that the team had implemented many of his suggestions into the car setup philosophy. Hamilton waved him off. "Setup means nothing when the pit wall panics every time the wind shifts," he said, referencing a radio message from lap 33 where he'd warned the team that grip was dropping rapidly in Sector 3. That warning, according to team insiders, was flagged but ultimately ignored in favor of a lap extension that destroyed tire performance and opened the door for McLaren to undercut successfully. The cost? A potential P2, lost in 30 seconds of indecision. As the argument peaked, another engineer, a senior one, attempted to defend the collective approach, only to become collateral damage in the crossfire. "If you all keep defending groupthink, don't be surprised when you keep finishing behind people who take risks," Hamilton snapped. At that moment, the engineer, clearly shaken, stood up, said nothing, and walked out. She was seen leaving the paddock shortly afterward, her badge turned face down, her phone off. Colleagues say she hasn't spoken to anyone on the strategy team since. And then came the door. Hamilton, now seething, reportedly grabbed his notes, shoved them into his bag, turned to Vasseur, and said, "I didn't leave Mercedes to babysit amateurs." He slammed the door so hard on his way out that a telemetry screen mounted behind him shattered on the wall. The impact sent shards across the floor. One team member had to be treated for a small cut. No one said a word. The meeting ended with stunned silence, broken only by the sound of someone quietly gathering broken plastic and glass from the floor. That night, Hamilton didn't attend the mandatory post-race engineering dinner, breaking a tradition held sacred even during the worst of weekends. Attempts to contact him by phone went unanswered. His team of personal assistants and security detail gave no explanation, and by morning, the paddock was in a frenzy. Witnesses reported seeing Hamilton's luggage being carried out of the Ferrari hospitality suite before sunrise, escorted by 2 members of his private staff and a third individual believed to be his longtime legal advisor. Several key items, including his personalized race helmet and backup steering wheel, were removed from the suite and locked in a secure flight case. Within 48 hours, a memo classified as internal red appeared on Ferrari's secure communications channel, a level of internal alert usually reserved for legal incidents or emergency protocol updates. The directive was short and absolute. No member of Ferrari personnel is permitted to discuss driver-related topics, internal strategy reviews, or performance debriefs from the Chinese Grand Prix with external media or non-authorized staff. This restriction is in effect immediately and until further notice. Violation will result in contract review. Sources within the media division say even communications staff were barred from answering basic questions about Hamilton's participation in upcoming press sessions. The fallout spread fast. Within 3 days, the PR department pulled Hamilton from a scheduled appearance in a Puma campaign shoot set in Milan. A Ferrari marketing manager told executives that contingency assets were being prepared in case Hamilton was unavailable for European leg promotional events. When asked what contingency assets meant, she reportedly replied, "Drivers who can wear red and smile." Back at Maranello, things were no better. Boardroom conversations became tense. Questions were raised about whether the long-term Hamilton project was already on life support. Some insiders believe Ferrari underestimated just how much autonomy Hamilton would demand. Others believe he's intentionally pushing the team to the brink to test who blinks first. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate, first quietly then louder, about whether Carlos Sainz's strong early season form had complicated Ferrari's internal pecking order. There was even talk of reopening contract negotiations that had been declared dead just weeks earlier. But the most revealing sign wasn't found in the paddock or in Maranello. It came from Hamilton himself. The seven-time champion, normally hyper-engaged on social media, especially after dramatic weekends, posted nothing. No pictures. No captions. No training videos. Not even a black screen or a vague quote. Just silence. Deafening, deliberate silence. For a man who has mastered the art of controlling the narrative, that silence wasn't an accident. It was a message. To Ferrari. To fans. To rivals. Something was broken. And Hamilton wasn't sure it could be fixed. And maybe that's the most terrifying part for Ferrari. Not the shouting, not the slammed doors, not even the cracked telemetry screen. The scariest thing might be that Hamilton hasn't said anything since. Because in Formula One, silence from a legend isn't peace. It's the sound of a storm building. What the cameras didn't catch, what even seasoned journalists missed, and what fans could have never predicted is that long before the drama with Ferrari exploded and long before the first whispers of tension between Lewis Hamilton and his new team reached the surface, Zack Brown had already begun moving the first invisible pieces of a plan so meticulously crafted, so unthinkably bold, it bordered on the cinematic. This wasn't just about contracts. This wasn't just about team politics. This was a mission. A mission to reshape the balance of power in Formula One forever. While the media was distracted with lap times and race incidents, while social media obsessed over post-race interviews and team radio, Brown was playing a different game. A deeper one. One rooted in silence, precision, and timing so sharp it could cut through titanium. And he had only one name in mind: Lewis Hamilton. It began not with a phone call, not even with a formal proposal, but with a message so subtle it would have slipped by anyone else. Early March. No public drama yet. Ferrari still smiling for the cameras. Hamilton still towing the party line. Yet behind the scenes, Brown reached out to one of Hamilton's closest advisors with a phrase that would echo in back channels across the paddock for weeks. If things unravel, you know where home is. 10 words. No negotiations. No pressure. Just a door cracked open. Just enough. Because Brown knew something that the world didn't. He knew Hamilton's return to McLaren wasn't just a possibility. It was a narrative begging to be written, a fire waiting to be lit. He didn't need to sell Lewis the idea. All he had to do was remind him that it was his story to finish. Then came the explosion in Italy. Ferrari's internal structure, long whispered to be volatile, collapsed publicly. Strategy failures, public disagreements, veiled criticisms in interviews. It was the perfect storm. And Brown? He didn't flinch. He activated Phase 2. This wasn't just about wooing Hamilton anymore. This was about creating leverage, about using the chaos as a tool of disruption. That's when he did the unthinkable. That's when he approached Mercedes, not with an offer, but with an ultimatum masked as opportunity. Hamilton to McLaren. Norris to Mercedes. A straight swap. A generational icon for a generational talent. The kind of proposition that stops the air in the room. Toto Wolff didn't laugh. He didn't reject it. He didn't even delay. He paused. He listened. Because he too had been watching. He too had felt the tremors. George Russell's flashes of brilliance shadowed by inconsistency, Norris's maturity far beyond his years, the growing need for a future-proof anchor at Brackley. But there was a problem. Norris wasn't just another driver. He was a brand. A $30 million contract locked him into McLaren's structure with the rigidity of reinforced steel. No standard negotiation would work. This required something bigger. This required a trade of magnitude Formula One had never seen before. And so, the games began. The Miami Grand Prix weekend became the epicenter of a covert operation so vast, so layered in secrecy, it would make intelligence agencies blush. Private meetings scheduled in 15-minute intervals, held in penthouse suites under assumed names. Entire hotel floors bought out. Staff rotated hourly to prevent leaks. Lawyers were flown in from Geneva, cybersecurity experts from Tel Aviv, and branding consultants from Los Angeles. All told, over 50 people were involved in shaping a deal that didn't officially exist. Not yet. They didn't call it a driver swap. They called it Project Switch. Code names replaced real ones, Driver X and Driver Y. Even internal emails were encrypted and time-limited, vanishing after 90 seconds of exposure. At one point, all printed documents were shredded on site within 2 minutes of being reviewed. No digital copies. No cloud storage. Total blackout. Brown had McLaren's board on alert. Emergency meetings were held at odd hours via encrypted Zoom links. Budget reallocations were approved. Sponsorship partners were briefed under the guise of media expansion strategy. McLaren's marketing division quietly commissioned a full cinematic teaser with footage of Hamilton's 2007 debut, intercut with stylized shots of a new papaya suit hanging in slow motion under dim spotlight. Brown wanted Hamilton to feel not just welcome, he wanted him to feel missed. He wanted him to feel needed. On the other end, Wolff mobilized his internal analytics team. Norris's telemetry was dissected. His psychological profile was updated using behavioral trend analysis from the last 36 months of race weekends. Simulations were run comparing his adaptability to car setups under various conditions: wet, dry, hybrid, high-speed street circuits, low-downforce tracks. Mercedes even built a ghost model in their simulator, one car driven by Norris's past data, the other by Russell. The results weren't shared. They didn't have to be. The fact that those simulations were commissioned at all told the real story. But here's where things got darker. A single private flight left Woking the Tuesday after Miami. On board, a McLaren executive, a team of legal advisors, and a black briefcase chained to a courier's wrist. Destination: an undisclosed estate outside Salzburg. There, behind closed doors, a preliminary term sheet was signed, not by Hamilton, not by Norris, but by two intermediaries acting on legal power of attorney. These weren't signatures. They were signals. Signals that both sides were ready to move to the next level. McLaren even offered a clause unheard of in Formula One, a legacy control option, where Hamilton could co-develop car concept designs for the next 3 years and veto future team branding decisions. They weren't offering him a seat. They were offering him a throne. Meanwhile, social media lit up with misdirection. Hamilton posted a photo of an old McLaren cap. Norris tweeted a stopwatch emoji. Russell liked a photo of Norris's karting days. Nothing was confirmed. Everything was intentional. Every post was orchestrated to either stir confusion or build curiosity. And it worked. Fans speculated wildly. YouTubers dissected hand gestures. Reddit forums exploded. Some believed it was all smoke and mirrors. Others were convinced this was the biggest reshuffling since Alonso's Ferrari exit. What they didn't know was that by this point, the deal was practically breathing. Until suddenly, silence. A week before Monaco, everything stopped. Meetings cancelled. Lawyers pulled back. A private investigator, hired to ensure the operation's secrecy, flagged a potential leak. Someone somewhere had talked. Or worse, someone had recorded something. McLaren imposed an immediate lockdown. Phones confiscated. All access badges reset. Digital firewalls tripled. Hamilton's camp went dark. His inner circle, once chatty with subtle hints, vanished from sight. Toto Wolff missed 3 consecutive calendar appointments. Zack Brown was seen leaving a building in Stuttgart wearing sunglasses at night. Tension hung like fog over the paddock. Then came the final twist. On the eve of the Monaco Grand Prix, a meeting was held in a villa above Port Hercules. No cameras. No entourage. Just 2 men, Hamilton and Brown. What they said remains unknown. But what's certain is that when Hamilton left, he wasn't smiling. And when Brown returned to the paddock the next morning, he wasn't walking, he was striding. Confident. Controlled. Like a man who had just locked something in. But nothing was announced. Nothing was confirmed. And that's where it gets even crazier. Because to this day, neither McLaren nor Mercedes has acknowledged a single part of what happened behind those doors. Norris remains silent. Hamilton, focused. Wolff, composed. But every insider agrees on one thing: something massive nearly changed the sport forever. Something that wasn't just about drivers, but about legacy, control, power, and a silent war between empires fighting not for today, but for the next decade of Formula One. The ripple effects are still being felt. And somewhere, deep in the archives of encrypted emails and vanished meeting notes, lies the blueprint of what could have been the greatest driver swap in the history of racing. What unfolded behind closed doors in the weeks leading up to the Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton swap is not merely the kind of transactional decision that defines most Formula One career moves. This was something else. This was drama that felt like it was pulled from the pages of a political thriller, where every signature had layers of power, where every clause was a weapon, and every whisper in a Paddock hallway could shift the balance of power in the sport. It was not just about racing. It was about empire building, legacy warfare, and rewriting the DNA of two of the most iconic teams in Formula One history. What we witnessed wasn't a driver trade. It was the start of a new arms race in the world's most elite motorsport, and no one walked away unchanged. Inside the halls of Woking, McLaren executives knew what was at stake the moment the first phone call came through from Mercedes. Lando Norris had become their crown jewel, not just in performance, but in brand value, in consistency, in long-term potential. He was their answer to Verstappen. Their proof that youth, when given enough time, could evolve into championship material. But McLaren also knew the clock was ticking. The gap to the front had narrowed, yes, but not fast enough. Lando had begun asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Questions about upgrades, about wind tunnel bottlenecks, about why his simulator feedback wasn't being translated into trackside results. He wasn't just looking for hope anymore. He was looking for confirmation. So when Mercedes came knocking, McLaren didn't react with panic. They reacted with a strategy. They demanded compensation that extended far beyond what any team had previously asked for in a driver release. It wasn't just about money, it was about information, leverage, and control. McLaren insisted Mercedes cover the entirety of Norris' performance bonuses for the 2024 season, regardless of whether he hit those targets in silver or in papaya. That meant if Norris took podiums or even a win with Mercedes, it would be McLaren that got paid. But that wasn't the real power play. The real coup was McLaren's demand for full access to Mercedes' integration of the current power unit telemetry. That's not just a data file. That's the beating heart of a Formula One car's performance. It includes deployment maps, throttle-to-torque conversion ratios, kinetic energy distribution, MGUH and MGUK interaction dynamics, and how the ERS blends over a race stint. With that data, McLaren could reverse-engineer aspects of how Mercedes made their power unit sing. In a grid where margins are measured in the hundredths of a second, that kind of insight is beyond gold. It's plutonium. But even as these chess pieces moved, a second narrative was forming, one no less explosive. Lewis Hamilton, the seven-time world champion, wasn't content to simply fade into the twilight of his career, surrounded by nostalgia and marketing campaigns. He wanted more. He wanted transformation. He wanted control. When word got out that Hamilton was interested in a McLaren return, many thought it would be ceremonial. A poetic swan song. They couldn't have been more wrong. Hamilton didn't just want to drive. He wanted access. Full, unrestricted access to McLaren's design studio, a space so secretive, even some senior staff aren't permitted to enter without prior clearance. Within those walls live the future, next-gen sidepod concepts, experimental aero solutions, hybrid cooling systems being developed for 2026 regs, and the early AI-integrated simulations for dynamic suspension responses. Hamilton wanted in. Not for curiosity. For influence. And McLaren, knowing the branding power, the technical IQ, and the global gravitational pull of Lewis Hamilton, said yes. But access to the design studio was only the beginning. Hamilton introduced what insiders now call the Heritage Clause, a section of his contract so unprecedented it sent legal teams into a frenzy. Under this clause, Hamilton won the right to co-create a globally distributed documentary series chronicling his McLaren return. Not a puff piece. A full cinematic production, with behind-the-scenes access, interviews, dramatizations, and even control over which race weekends are spotlighted. Hamilton will be portrayed not just as a returning hero, but as a re-architect of a new dynasty. The clause also includes his own signature merchandise line, co-branded with McLaren, allowing him to embed his fashion, activism, and personal ethos directly into the team's fabric. Even that wasn't the limit. Hamilton negotiated power over the very structure of McLaren's future. He will now have advisory input on the Junior Driver Academy, not just mentorship, but actual selection. That means the next generation of McLaren drivers could be handpicked by Hamilton himself. He's also been granted veto power over certain simulator developments, ensuring that the tech used to train the future will be shaped by the man who already redefined the past. And then, in one of the most staggering moves of all, Hamilton included a clause that allowed him to select his race engineer. Not from a list of available staff, but from a shortlist personally curated by team principal Andrea Stella. It was the equivalent of being handed the keys to the kingdom and being told, "Design your own throne." On the flip side, Lando Norris' move to Mercedes was not loud, but it was thunderous. He didn't release statements soaked in sentimentality. He didn't burn bridges. But he made his intentions crystal clear. Mercedes offered not only a faster car, but a more sophisticated infrastructure, a more responsive feedback loop between driver and engineering departments, and a support system with championship pedigree embedded into every floor tile at Brackley. Norris spent 3 full days embedded with the team, running through simulator trials, attending technical debriefs, and testing how his telemetry inputs meshed with Mercedes' predictive models. The engineers were reportedly stunned by how fast Norris adapted, not just to the simulator, but to the language, the pacing, the expectation. When he stepped out after those 72 hours, Norris told Toto Wolff, "It feels like I've been driving in the past." That sentence alone confirmed what everyone had feared at McLaren. He wasn't just leaving for better speed. He was leaving because he no longer believed the climb was possible where he was. Mercedes didn't waste time. They immediately began restructuring aspects of their development process around Norris' preferences. Real-time feedback from the simulator team was used to redesign the ergonomics of the 2025 cockpit layout to match his driving posture. Data analysts retooled comparison models using Norris' racing style to predict optimal tire degradation strategies. They weren't integrating him, they were elevating him. And what does all this mean for the sport? It means that Formula One is no longer just about race pace. It's about politics, architecture, branding, and vision. McLaren, once viewed as a team in slow resurgence, now has the face of a global icon whose every move generates headlines, sponsorships, and innovation. Mercedes, far from declining, has reset its foundations with a driver young enough to become the nucleus of an entirely new era. This wasn't a trade. It was a tectonic shift. It was Hamilton reshaping a legacy on his own terms. It was Norris betting on himself when patience gave way to ambition. It was McLaren betting that legacy can be engineered. It was Mercedes proving that the future isn't given, it's taken. And the most thrilling part? This was just the beginning. When the swap was finally signed, it didn't happen in the dazzling corridors of the paddock, under the relentless flash of media cameras, or even within the polished boardrooms of team headquarters. It happened in silence. Inside a luxury hotel in Geneva whose name will never be leaked, on a floor that doesn't officially exist, in a room guarded by 3 layers of security: physical, digital, and legal. No press. No photographers. No leaks. Not yet. Just a table. A contract. 4 signatures. And the unmistakable sense that something enormous had just shifted beneath the foundations of the sport. This wasn't just another silly season move. This wasn't a last-minute desperation play by a team on the ropes. This was a premeditated, deeply calculated exchange of titans. And despite the best efforts to keep it locked down, the truth wanted out. It clawed its way through encrypted files, buried metadata, obscure server notes mislabeled by overworked IT staff at the FIA. Someone somewhere, whether out of carelessness or silent rebellion, left the digital trail wide open. Not obvious to the average eye, but once decoded by a coalition of online F1 sleuths, it was damning. 2 innocuous references, DRILVL 2/25 and XFER/2025/Q3R were enough. That's all it took. The internet, starved for real movement in a stagnant championship fight, exploded. Suddenly, the grid was no longer safe. Rumors bled into headlines. Headlines blurred into reality. Team principals went into hiding. Press officers locked down social media access. Private jets were tracked by anonymous accounts. Every move, every whisper, every handshake behind the scenes was documented, analyzed, weaponized. This wasn't a news cycle. This was a storm. And then nothing. No confirmations. No denials. Just silence. A silence so deliberate it screamed louder than any official announcement ever could. In the days that followed, subtle movements told their own story. McLaren released a nostalgic video montage of their 2007 season, set to haunting piano music, no caption. Mercedes quietly removed Hamilton from the header banner on their website. Toto Wolff was spotted leaving a discreet cafe in Munich, his expression unreadable, his phone ringing non-stop. Ferrari? Ferrari disappeared entirely. No media availability. No strategy briefings. Just a one-line statement: "We will announce our future plans in due course." Behind that statement lies absolute chaos. Multiple sources close to Maranello speak of a week unlike anything seen since the Vettel-era collapse. Boardroom showdowns. Legal threats. A suspected resignation that was immediately walked back. One high-level executive reportedly tried to push through an emergency proposal to retain Hamilton by offering full driver control over technical decisions, unprecedented in Ferrari's history. The proposal was blocked. Not by the team principal. Not by Vasseur. But by a direct order from the Agnelli family itself. There are whispers that John Elkann intervened personally. Whispers that haven't stopped. Whispers that say this was never just about a driver. It was about power. And someone lost. And then there's Hamilton himself. Since Shanghai, he hasn't been the same. On the surface, still polished, still professional. But behind the scenes, everything changed. He stopped attending evening strategy meetings. He bypassed internal briefings. He began flying privately again, often skipping the team hotel, choosing instead to stay in independent accommodations with his own staff. He changed his helmet design mid-season, something he hasn't done in years. And that post-race interview in Miami, where he said, "Sometimes you have to go backward to move forward." Nobody understood it then. Now it reads like a confession. Because this isn't just a return to McLaren. This is a reckoning. A homecoming forged not in nostalgia but in unfinished business, raw ambition, and quiet rage. This is Hamilton going back not to relive his past, but to rewrite it. To prove he never needed Mercedes to dominate, that greatness lives inside him. Not in the wind tunnel, not in the engine mode, not in Toto's spreadsheets, but in the blood, in the grit, in the fire that never went out. And as one legend returns, another takes his place. Lando Norris, the perennial fan favorite, now finds himself behind the wheel of the most dominant car of the hybrid era. But this isn't a coronation. This is a trial by fire. Because when you replace a 7-time champion, you don't get applause, you get comparisons. Every lap, every corner, every post-race comment will be dissected, measured against Hamilton's legacy. The car may be fast, but the pressure? The pressure is merciless. And if he falters, if he hesitates even slightly, there are names already being whispered as replacements. Young, hungry, ruthless names. And let's not forget the undercurrents. The engineers defecting in the night. The contracts being renegotiated behind closed doors. At least 4 members of McLaren's tech department are reportedly fielding offers from Mercedes. 2 of Hamilton's longtime race engineers are rumored to be switching camps with him. Even more shocking, one of Ferrari's aerodynamic specialists is allegedly being courted by Red Bull. It's a chain reaction. A domino effect. The swap wasn't a move, it was a trigger. But beyond the teams, beyond the politics, beyond the billions of dollars and decades of history, there's something more powerful brewing. The fans. No longer content to sit back and consume whatever narrative the paddock feeds them, the fans have become insurgents of information. They're tracking private jet tail numbers. They're building lap time prediction models. They're creating underground forums with leaked telemetry data, analyzing grip ratios and cornering deltas like they're decoding military intel. Every piece of information is currency. Every theory is a battlefield. Every opinion is a war cry. This is not just sport anymore. This is something else. Something primal. Something digital. Something untouchable. Formula One is no longer just a showcase of speed. It's a living organism, fueled by drama, betrayal, risk, and redemption. Every weekend in 2025 will be soaked in context, unresolved rivalries, invisible contracts, legacy-defining moves. Qualifying sessions will feel like political debates. Press conferences will read like courtroom testimonies. Race starts will be psychological warfare wrapped in tire smoke. And the story doesn't end at the checkered flag. Because the moment the race ends, the speculation begins. What did that radio message mean? Why did that team strategist leave the garage mid-race? Was that pit stop botched or planned? Is this driver being sabotaged to make room for another? In 2025, the truth lives in the shadows, and that's exactly where the fans are now looking. No one is safe. No alliance is permanent. No seat is guaranteed. The swap has reset the board, but the pieces are still moving. This isn't a new season. This is a new age. And if you blink, even for a second, you'll miss it. So keep your eyes open. Keep your ears sharp. Stay hungry. Because this is Formula One at its most dangerous, most brilliant, most human. And it's only just getting started.